Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. Homelessness is up 18%. That's on top of the 13% the year before. But you got to love that they still have pride in their city. Look at that. The tent has LA. Isn't that nice? I mean, I know this looks bad, but the more we look like Calcutta, the more we can compete globally with India. That's what Vivek tells me. Am I right? Just imagine all the desperate future STEM geniuses being produced right now. They can't watch Saved by the Bell because they don't have streaming. If they're gonna be great. That's according to Vivek. So here, Arnaud Bertrand. He says this is undoubtedly the single most incriminating statistic in the United States system, alongside the 13% poverty rate in the United States. Skyrocketing homelessness when the economy grows means that something is fundamentally broken. The U.S. saw an 18.1% increase in homelessness this year, with more than 770,000 people counted as homeless. So, and of course, that's an undercount. It is an incriminating statistic, but we all have eyes we could see. Also, we don't need this statistic to tell us what the hell is going on in America. Let me just, but here, let me just real quickly. The United States saw an 18.1% increase in homelessness this year, a dramatic rise driven mostly by the lack of affordable housing. So it's not just, I thought it was all just young drug addicts. But it's driven by the lack of affordable housing, as well as a devastating natural disasters and a surge of migrants in several parts of the country, federal officials say. Nonsense. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development said federally required tallies taken, blah, 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 blah. The increase comes on top of a 12% increase in 2023. So I'm not a math genius, but I think that's close to 30% increase over the last 2 years in homelessness in the richest country in the world, as we send hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars overseas for wars and bombs. The 2023 increase also was driven by people experiencing homelessness for the first time. The numbers overall represent 23 of every 10,000 people in the United States, with black people being way overrepresented among the homeless population. No American should face homelessness, and the Biden-Harris administration is committed to ensuring every family has access. This is funny. That's the head of the Housing and Urban Development said. Adrienne Todman said in a statement, adding the focus should remain on evidence-based efforts to prevent and end homelessness. Oh, I like the evidence. No one should ever have to face homelessness. It should sneak up from you from behind. Among the most concerning trends was nearly 40% rise in families being homeless. I thought it was just, they always say it's just drug addicts. That's what Elon Musk says. Families' homelessness more than doubled. Nearly 150,000 children. So it's families, it's children, it's veterans. But they want you to think it's just drug addicts. Well, we just need more prisons. Disasters also played a part in the rise. The Maui wildfire. More than 5,200 people were staying in emergency shelters in Hawaii. Boy, I need some cough syrup. Increased homelessness is tragic. Yeah. Okay. Robert Marbo Jr., the former executive director for the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, called nearly a 33%, see, I'm not good at math, 33% increase in homelessness over the past 4 years disgraceful. I can think of a few other words. And said the federal government needs to abandon efforts to prioritize permanent housing. We need to focus on, let me bring in our guests. We have a guest who specializes Keith McHenry helped found the first Food Not Bombs group in Boston in 1980 with 7 of his friends. He has recovered surplus food and shared meals with the homeless as a volunteer with Food Not Bombs for 45 years. He spent 500 days in jail in San Francisco for sharing meals with homeless people, and he faced 25 to life in prison. He is the author of Hungry for Peace and the Anarchist Cookbook. Food Not Bombs is active today in at least 1,000 cities in over 65 countries. Please welcome to the show, Keith McHenry. How you doing, Keith?
Oh, thank you so much, Jimmy, for having me. And Robert Morbot has an agenda, and his agenda is mega shelters that have been a total failure. And the most famous one was that they took the county jail in St. Petersburg, Florida, and built a new jail next to it, and then opened the old jail as the homeless shelter. And the sheriff department ran it. It was started by Robert Morbot, and it turned out that people basically just cycled through it. Within 30 days, 90% roughly of the people that went into that shelter moved back out on the streets, because they preferred to be out on the streets rather than in a minimum security jail, basically.
So
he's like kind of famous for that.
So this guy has his own agenda, and he says we need to focus on treatment of substance use and mental illness, and bring back program requirements like job training.
And he also is he potentially will be back in this position as he was under Trump. He was the head of homelessness for the Trump administration in the first term, and it should be pointed out that some of the Trump, the kind of the Palantir individuals that are supporting Trump, that are associated with, Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance, is a person by the name of Joe Lansdale. He was one of the founders of the CIA contractor Palantir. I think Whitney Webb speaks a lot about their relationships, and the thing that was under him, he started a program called Cicero Institute, and one of its pillars is making it a crime to be homeless in the United States. And here's a billionaire connected to the CIA who is running this program, and he's helped promote the idea of taking Grants Pass versus Johnson, which was a law that said, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal ruling that said if you didn't have places for people to be, you couldn't make it illegal to be homeless. So that got overturned in April by the U.S. Supreme Court, making it possible to make homelessness illegal in the United States. And immediately after that, we might recall that Gavin Newsom signed an executive order making encampments illegal in the state of California. And immediately after that, cities started to clamp down very hard on the homeless. And I know here in Santa Cruz, where I feed people every week, and was feeding people every day for the 3 years of the lockdown, the panic in the homeless community was outrageous. And then we're referring to families. Saturday, I arrive with tents and sleeping bags and tarps to the meal every week. We spend maybe about $1,000 to $2,000 a month on tarps, tents, and sleeping bags to replace the ones taken by the police in these what are called encampment abatement sweeps. And in our city, we've got something like Santa Cruz was just given $4 million to get rid of the homeless around the homeless shelter. And we intercepted emails between the city and the director of the homeless shelter cheering on the elimination of the homeless outside the homeless shelter in what's supposed to be a several-year campaign to make sure homeless people don't congregate in the neighborhood where the shelter is.
So when the cops come in and do one of the, I mean, you understand. I think everybody understands that it's an untenable situation to have people living in tents on streets in the city. But so when they come in and they get rid of them, do they provide them with a place to go?
No, absolutely not. So, in fact, what happens is that they take your belongings, and often they'll take everything. So one of the worst, so what often happens is, first of all, when you're homeless and families are homeless, they frequently move into their vehicle, right? That's the first logical thing to do. And it's not long, cities will often, if they perceive you to be living in your vehicle, will start aggressively ticketing you. We have an entire department, a group of people in the Santa Cruz Police Department whose entire job is to ticket and tow homeless people's vehicles. So once you then lose your vehicle, and a huge percentage of these people that I run into are families or elderly women, which is really a horrible thing. And then they come to our meal at the town clock and ask us where the homeless shelter is. So we have all the phone numbers for both of the shelters, and there is never any room in these shelters. So it's not uncommon for me to hand, as I did on Saturday, to this young mother and her children, sleeping bags so they don't freeze in their car, or in the case of the women or other people that lose their cars that are junked by the city. Then I hand them the sleeping bag, the tent, and we find a experienced homeless man, particularly, who we trust, who then guides them to the best place along the river or levee to safely sleep until they can potentially get into a shelter, which often can take weeks. So
when they spend $4 million in taking away homeless people's tents and sleeping bags and what have you, what you think they would spend $4 million, like, I don't know, providing some kind of shelter for those people, right? Wouldn't that be? But they don't do that, so they're not.
They don't do that. So the state of California under Newsom spent since 2019 to now $24 billion on homelessness, and we don't really see any evidence of So our city was given 16 million. And then was given another 4 million, and keeps getting millions. Jeff Bezos gave the shelter 2 million, like 2 years ago, and so on. And yet there's no more shelter beds in the whole town. In fact, there's less, and there is no more housing. So what it appears to be happening is they're taking the homeless money and other money from some other pockets probably, and they're putting it through housing authority for allegedly affordable housing, and then that is seed money to build what becomes luxury housing, luxury condominiums, and then what they do is then they pay a fine for not having affordable housing in the luxury condo development. That goes into a trust somewhere. We never know where that money is, but you don't end up with any
all right, so
affordable housing.
Hold on, we're going to get to that. So Dallas actually worked to overhaul its homeless system, and it saw a 16% drop in its numbers between 2022 and 2024. Do you know anything about what they're doing in Dallas to do that?
I don't know what that program is, and sometimes they'll say they do the same thing in Houston. But our people that are feeding people in Dallas are not seeing any kind of drop. And the people in Houston are not seeing any kind of drop. So my suspicion is that it's an actual what they did here in Santa Cruz, where our mayor, who is incredibly anti-homeless, Fred Keeley, he goes around saying, oh, well, homelessness dropped in Santa Cruz County by 32%. And it turns out it didn't really drop obviously didn't drop by 32%. It went up. But the way they cooked the numbers in the point in time count made it possible for them to say this through some analyst type study of the point in time count, which then they will spin that way. So like, for instance, the number that they're saying 770,000 homeless Americans, an interesting thing, there used to be a time where you could Google 750,000 homeless Americans, and it would show that number stayed the same from a little before, like about 1989, right up until the housing foreclosure crisis. And the odd thing is when 5,500,000 families lost their homes in the housing foreclosure crisis, the number of homeless people went down, according to the federal government, by 250,000. So, the numbers thing, it's very hard to count homeless people. And they choose the winter to do point in time counts because they assume most people will be in a shelter, and they could go to the door of the shelter and say, how many people are in your shelter today? And then the management go, oh, we got 100 people in here. And they go, oh, there's 100 homeless people here. And so it's kind of logical to do the count that way. But the reality is most homeless people are not in shelters, and it's impossible to find them. And when we did it last time, I did it here in Santa Cruz, it was one of the atmospheric rivers, and we couldn't hardly find it. It was that's why really the number went down to 32% drop in homelessness, is the weather was so bad that day you couldn't find any homeless people. It didn't mean that there wasn't any homeless people. It's just impossible to find them.
So in 2024, the wealth of the world's 10 richest billionaires increased by 85%, while homelessness in the United States also rose by 18%. That's a stark reflection. So we have the largest income inequality since the time of the pharaohs. And here's the richest man in the world. He says, in most cases, the word homeless is a lie. It's usually a propaganda word for violent drug addicts with severe mental. It's usually. So approximately 20 to 30% of homeless population are children. So,
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's 35,000 veterans also.
Yeah.
And then 53% of people living in homeless shelters and 40% of the unsheltered homeless had formal earnings, meaning they worked. So they actually worked. They have jobs. But
one of my best friends, Crystal, she works doing sampling at Costco in the day, and she goes around the corner and unloads UPS trucks all night long. And she doesn't qualify for housing in Santa Cruz County because she has a bad FICO score, because she had tickets for living outside, which then destroyed her, her FICO score and her credit. And so she, even though she has the money, she can't get into a place. So she sleeps in the woods across from UPS warehouse. And I can tell there's, it's a huge, and then another thing that I think people in America should realize, it is a full-time job to be homeless, because you have to pack up all your stuff, move down the corner, pack up all your stuff again. You have to have somebody watch your stuff when you go to the bathroom so you don't lose your stuff. You have to, it is a difficult job to be a homeless person.
So when the richest guy in the world, who's worth almost $500 billion now, you think, and he's supposed to be super smarty pants, you think he could figure out how to fix the homeless problem, at least in his home state? You think it could take, whatever.
Well, HUD says they could end homelessness in the United States
for $20 billion.
Yeah, $20 billion, but I'd say maybe even $40 billion. And
so, what do you think? What do you think he gets out of this kind of attitude, propagating this kind of attitude? Is that because he's insulated and the only homeless? Because most people don't see the homeless; they're invisible. But the ones they see are the drug addicts on the street who are harassing people. So you got to. And by the way, most of those people are mentally ill, and so we don't. We did a thing called deinstitutionalization, and a lot of people think that started with Reagan, talking about but we had mental hospitals in the 50s, and they just started a thing called deinstitutionalization. So now we used to have over 500,000 people being housed in mental facilities in the United States. Now we got rid of all of them, and now we have close to the same number in prisons that are mentally ill. So, what do you think is more expensive, a mental hospital or a prison? In California, it's $120,000 a year to imprison one person per year. So, don't you think we could find a way to house those people for less than $120,000 a year? Of course, we could. So, why do you think? What is in it for guys like Elon Musk? Is it? Say, I always say chaos favors the establishment, and George Carlin says, the homeless are there to make the poor people work harder.
Which I think is true. But the thing, one of it is homelessness. The existence of homelessness helps suppress the wages to stay at $7.25 an hour, because the last thing you want to do is become homeless. So you'll take any kind of job and take any kind of abuse. The other thing that is tragic is that when we see this United Healthcare person getting shot down in Manhattan. A huge percentage of the homeless population are actually people who are either injured on jobs, or, like the times I've been homeless, Once I've been homeless a couple of times just from illness and losing, not able to go to work because I was ill, and then losing my apartment and then living on the streets. I also run into a ton of homeless people who are injured on the job. Their disability runs out, and a lot of people that are hooked on heroin, or you can't get heroin anymore, but back in the days when you could, now only fentanyl, you would it was because you couldn't get off your meds from your back injury or whatever other injury because you were cut off at a certain point, and then you just keep, doing street drugs, and then you end up in this mess like that. But I think Elon Musk's point of view is partially ignorance, but it could be because of his relationship with people like Joe Lansdale, who have also are investing in prisons and so on themselves, their hedge funds, and that they are intending really to just, as that saying goes, first they came for the homeless, but I was not homeless. And I'm very concerned that a lot of what's being discussed is essentially moving the homeless into large camps. In our county, the discussion was to send people to Camp Roberts, which is in Monterey County and maybe Santa Barbara County. It's on the cusp there, San Miguel off of 101, and put everybody in that military base, and then that's your solution. You just remove everybody from the cities, put them in these giant military bases, and maybe somebody, friend of Elon Musk, is going to get the contract to run those facilities and to, and just another money-making scam for them. I'm also concerned when they add that we could see, like, I don't know how many thousands of people became homeless after Helena, right? In North Carolina and Tennessee. But this guy, Joe Lansdale from Palantir, he was able to encourage a law to be passed in Kentucky, where you're allowed to use a stand your ground. Part of the law against living outside, making it illegal to live outside in Kentucky, is if the person doesn't move quickly enough, you're protected from liability if you feel you need to shoot the homeless person to get them to cooperate. In Tennessee, that same person was able to get a law passed that if you're homeless in Tennessee, it's a felony. And then so all across America, they're creating these insane laws. So you end up with Helena. I get calls from people seeking food in Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, all the time, because they've been displaced and they've been forced into homelessness by Helena.
You know what's amazing is I did a tour earlier this year in Europe, and you don't see homeless people in Denmark, Copenhagen, Norway, Oslo. I saw one or two in Amsterdam, Rotterdam. No, you don't. Berlin. I didn't see homeless people. Did we see London? We saw homeless people, but Stockholm, Sweden, didn't see homeless people. It's like, so human beings have figured this out. They figured out how to create a society that isn't riddled with a 30% increase in homeless people in 2 years, while the economy's booming and billionaires are now he's worth $500 billion. Hey, it's time to upgrade your coffee. 1775 Vitality Coffee isn't just coffee; it's brain fuel. No kidding. With lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, and turkey tail mushrooms. I've heard of turkey tail mushrooms. It's coffee that doesn't just wake you up, it keeps you sharp. Lion's mane and reishi supercharge your focus. Cordyceps delivers energy without the crash, and their hand-picked Bolivian beans deliver bold flavor that corporate coffee can't touch. No fillers, no nonsense, just coffee that works as hard as you do. Proudly backed by Rumble, this isn't coffee for the conformists. It's coffee for the bold, for the free, for the rebellious. Head to 1775coffee.com. Use the code Jimmy for 15% off. Make your mornings great and coffee that stands for bold flavor, uncompromising quality, and the freedom Rumble fights for every day. Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there.